Hello, beautiful alchemist. Welcome to Reiki Radio. I am your host, Yolanda, and today we have an amazing discussion. I think this is going to clarify so much for so many of you listening. I got to speak with an author of a book called The Illumination Code: 7 Keys to Unlock Your Quantum Intelligence. Our guest's name is Kim Chestney. And she also authored some other books about intuition in the past. One was called Radical Intuition, and the other was The Psychic Workshop. She is the founder of the Intuition Lab and Create, which is a festival. So we deep dive into quantum intelligence, into intuition, what the Illumination Code is. But what I'm so excited for you to learn is how this is really accessible to all of us. I think there are a lot of misconceptions around intuition. I've been telling you all year that I think this is something so important for all of us at this time to come into a relationship with, to have more understanding about. It is part of our natural design and function. But what Kim did in this book is she also dives into the scientific evidence around intuition and what it is that we're capable of. And so, in her intuition lab, not only does she teach people to connect with their intuition, there are practices like remote viewing and delving into past lives. We talk about all of this. I ask her about guides, your connection to them, if they're around all the time. We talk about how to have that balance between the material and the non-physical realms. We talk about if, some gifts are just more natural to some of us than others. All of your questions that I have been asked over the years about intuition, I ask Kim. And I really can't wait for you to hear this conversation. So, if you do want to know more about her work, be sure to visit her website, kimchestney.com. The link is down in the show description. Also, if this is something that you want to dive into, she has an upcoming class that starts tomorrow. The class is called Inner Magic and it starts on May 7th. And she will be teaching this online. And if you can't come live, you can access the recordings. So all of that information is available through kimchestney.com. I really hope you enjoy this interview. I will see you on the other side. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Reiki Radio. Today we have an amazing guest, Kim Chestney, author of the Illumination Code: 7 Keys to Unlock Your Quantum Intelligence. So, first, I just want to say thank you and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Yolanda. I'm so excited to dig into this and have a great conversation today.
Yeah, there's so much to ask you. So, we're going to just jump right in. Even with the title of your book, that alone was very intriguing. And there's so many reasons I'm excited to have this conversation with you, but you are considered an intuition expert. And one of the first things I want to just get out of the way is a lot of people think that there are some people that are psychic or intuitive and other people don't have this accessibility. So could you first talk about your thoughts around this and why this may be important for us to come into relationship with these abilities?
Yeah, I really appreciate that question because I think that that is a misconception that has fueled humankind for probably as long as we can remember in our culture, especially particularly in the West, that is. And the reality is that everybody has intuition. Every single person has it. My first book that I wrote, boy, I guess it was 20 years ago, The Psychic Workshop, really addressed that issue. And at the time when that book came out, it was still a real revolutionary idea that, wait, you don't have to be born with like superpowers to have these experiences, because we all were sort of conditioned to think, well, if we weren't born as a psychic, that none of this stuff was available to us.
Right.
But that's 100% not true. Some people, granted, are born with a gift, a talent, just like any other area, like painting or drawing or science. We have gifts and talents and alignments, but every single person can develop their intuition and use it every day to live their life better.
Yeah. And that's the thing too. And it's funny, this has come up a lot this year. I've mentioned it on the podcast several times. It's like I just have this feeling that this is something important for us to really tap into, tune into, especially with there's so much that we see in the outer world without really having any consideration of what we're actually seeing. So could you talk a little bit about, before we dive into it all, why it is important from your point of view that we come into relationship with our intuition and how this could help us collectively?
Yeah, and I agree with you 100%. I also have that feeling very strongly that this is something that is, it's not just something that's, oh, it's great, we should understand it, it's really cool and neat. It's something that's vital, I think, to the future of humanity and to the evolution of our consciousness. And I was actually giving an event at the Edgar Cayce Center last week, and she introduced me, and I have that in my bio that I really feel that this is key to the new frontier. This is really the new frontier of developing consciousness and the awareness of human potential. And great people throughout history have recognized this. You know, it's Einstein, Steve Jobs. I mean, not people who are just in the woo place, like Tesla, people who have done extraordinary things recognize that intuition is the secret sauce to so much magic in the world, whether it's our personal genius, our creative genius, our technological genius, or our spiritual knowing and these extraordinary spiritual experiences we have when we can start to connect with ourselves and each other. So there's so much untapped potential in this area. And I think the more that we start to dig in and understand what intuition really is, which is part of the work that I'm doing, is trying to help people understand that it's not just this ephemeral sort of woo-woo thing. This is a
Right.
really valuable part of our wiring and what we're made of. So once we start to raise awareness of that and more people start to accept that, yeah, I have another way of thinking that can really support my life and do these extraordinary things. There's so much out there to be done, and I'm so excited to see where it's all leading.
Yeah, it is very exciting, but I love that in your book you really do highlight and give some emphasis to the scientific side of things. And there's I'll ask you about that later. But one of the first things I want to get out of the way, because you do in the title of the book, it has 7 keys to unlock your quantum intelligence. And now we are starting to hear more about, quantum intelligence, the quantum field, quantum physics, these types of things. So could you talk a little bit about what quantum intelligence is and what the illumination code is that you write about?
Yeah, well, let's start with quantum intelligence,
Yes.
and then we can segue into the Illumination Code, because you really it takes a little bit of conversation around that to understand what I'm getting at, because it is a
Yeah.
little mysterious, the title, the Illumination Code. But the idea with the quantum intelligence, I think, is it's a really important concept from the last question we were talking about, because we live in this world, this material world, where we've learned to think rationally with our linear mind, cause and effect world, cause and effect mind, right? So everything works in this world with our thinking life and material reality. But what we found from the quantum revolution, it has taught us that there's a whole nother reality embedded in the reality that we see, that this reality is sort of just an illusion or projection of our source reality. And the source reality operates in the quantum way, the microcosm, right? So instead of cause and effect, suddenly the laws of physics that we know, that we've invested in for hundreds and hundreds of years, no longer apply.
Mm.
When you get down to this level, this microcosmic level, impossible things are possible. Particles can communicate from vast distances when they're nowhere near each other, right? There's all kinds of new revelations about time, that time doesn't exist and that everything's happening all at once. So all of this dimension where all the information of life is stored in a microcosmic level is read by one thing, not our everyday thinking mind, our intuitive mind. So our intuitive mind can access that and can access all of that information that's stored on a quantum level, which harkens back to the age-old conversations about the Akashic records and things like that. So what was so exciting to me, and this writing this book actually blew my mind, because I didn't even, before working with some of these physicists and really understanding the implications of modern day science, I didn't really grasp how really important intuition was on the science end, but truly comes down to one simple thought, and that's the idea that intuition is a quantum phenomenon.
Right.
That's why it seems impossible in our world. That's why everyone says, oh, that you could never do that, because it doesn't obey the laws of our physical reality. It obeys the laws of the quantum reality. So, yes, people can be entangled, and you can think of someone who's on the other side of the planet and they call you at the same time because you're still entangled. You're operating in a quantum way. Yes, you can know the future because all of that information is out there. And at a quantum level, it's stored in the field, and your quantum mind can know it. So I'm not trying to like oversaturate this word quantum because I know we hear it a lot.
Mhm.
But the reality is, when we understand intuition as a quantum function, suddenly all of those mysteries, all that supernatural phenomenon makes sense.
Right, right. And so now there's two things I want to bring up before we dive into the how to and, even the information in the book of how we're in relationship to all of this. So with what you just said, I have to ask you this because a lot of people who listen to the podcast are Reiki practitioners or curious about it and these such things. And
Mhm.
there's a different ideas within this community. Some people think it is intuitive. Some people think intuition has nothing to do with it. I personally, I'm like, there's no way that your intuition can't be involved, especially when you consider we do remote sessions. So we work remotely, right? And in
Mhm.
reading your book, I was like, this is so interesting considering that it's almost like remote viewing in a sense. So I wanted to talk about that more of the quantum entanglement, what you've learned and experienced about the ways that we are in connection, even beyond the physical. So could you share a little bit about that?
Yeah. Yeah, I love this conversation. I'm a big proponent of Reiki, and I'm a Reiki practitioner as well. So this is something that's been dear to my heart. And when I started doing Reiki probably 20 years ago, and I remember I learned for the first time about distance Reiki, and I was like,
Yeah,
how could that be possible? Right? I was like, how is it possible? I'm like, well, they say it's possible, so we're just going to do it. I didn't know how it worked,
right,
but it worked. And I was like, how is this working? And I never really understood. And I think part of this quest for intuition also answered those same questions with
right,
how do these things work non-locally? So, digging into all the science and understanding that what science is telling us, this isn't even just a woo-woo idea anymore, is that there is a quantum field, an invisible sea of information and energy that connects all things. We're all living in it. We're all entangled with it. It interpenetrates our body. It's not really outside or inside, it's everywhere. And all the things that we do, everything we think, say, feel, all of that affects the field, is stored in the field, is saved by the field, and can be read intuitively, right? So healing and Reiki through the distance model is very fascinating with the field because we realize that there really is no thing, first of all, as physical reality.
right,
So we think, oh, we touch people, that's great because we're touching them locally, and that's like a little extra energy when we're up close. But in reality, there is no such thing really as long-term distance, and there's no such thing as time. So we can do these same things energetically that we could do in the physical world in terms of sending energy, in terms of sending healing, visualization, all these things it turns out are really powerful because they operate through this energetic field. And though they might not seem as tangible as physical reality, they're just as powerful.
right. Yeah, it is interesting. I remember when I first learned, because all of my family's on the East Coast and I would practice, and sometimes I would have the experience, it felt more real to work remotely in so many ways. So I'm glad that, we're talking about this because a lot of people do wonder, like, is this possible? But I'm like, what are you doing? Like,
Yeah.
think about what you're doing and how that is, how
And
it
there's
is
there's real
possible.
science. Yeah, it's
Right.
real science now. So that's the thing. You don't have to just suspend it up to, well, I'll trust that something's happening here. But no, now we understand how it's happening.
Right. Okay. So the real science part. So this is another thing I wanted to ask you about because a lot of people don't know that even within the government, like over years, there have been so many programs that
Mm,
have trained people in techniques such as remote viewing and these types of things. And
mhm.
so where a lot of people do just put this in the category of like woo woo and, not scientific at all. It's interesting even when you look at even the governments invest in these practices and these trainings.
Absolutely. And, I've had people ask me over the years, well, what evidence is there that this is really working? And my answer is usually first, well, just try it sometimes and have a personal experience,
Yeah,
and you're going to get some evidence right off the bat
right.
because anyone who's really opened up to this and experienced it knows it's real.
Yeah.
But beyond that, looking at the worldwide governments have invested this. When we want to talk about the United States government alone with Project Stargate, invested over $20 million in a 20-year program of psychic spying. There's been movies made about it. The Men Who Stare at Goats, Russell Targ did a movie about it. There's a whole group of scientists that worked on the project with Stanford University and the DIA. So we have like heavy hitters, big names,
Mhm.
smart people, not woo-woo people at
Right.
all involved in this project. Bringing in some artists and intuitives to do the intuitive work as well was part of the process. But this was all hush hush until I think Jimmy Carter apparently accidentally talked about it on national television or something, and they had to like shut it down. You know what I'm saying? But we know it went for 20 years. So no government is going to invest that much time and money into something that's not real or doesn't
Right.
work. So it's such a great validation to see
Yeah.
this. But knowing that, I think there is a part of the powers that be that don't really want us to be empowered by this. So I think there's definitely been over the course of history um, sort of a conditioning away from intuition because intuition empowers us.
Right.
Intuition allows us to do extraordinary things, and it's much easier for us just to go about our lives believing like it doesn't exist
Mhm.
than if we actually go out and do this and everybody starts experiencing these things. So there's a little bit of that going on too, I think.
I have to ask you this as a side note to what you just said, because this is another thing I think people often have a challenge with, is when you do start to open up intuitively and you do start to perceive life differently, you perceive yourself differently, you're able to perceive everything around you and just from a different lens.
Mhm.
However, there are so many people around you that still aren't necessarily seeing from that lens. And so a lot of times people have like this bit of tug of war with accepting what they're able to perceive, but also not feeling like, a weirdo or, and it can really play on them trusting themselves or not. So, did you ever encounter that personally? And what
Did
is your suggestion around this?
Welcome to my life. Yes. Yes, yes, yes. My whole life. Yes. And it was one of those things, I have 6 planets in Scorpio, so I was made for this, so I was like a dog with a bone with this, so I wasn't ever gonna let it go. So, but yes, my family, friends, like throughout my whole life. So I think part of my personal crusade with this was really validating and justifying, like, hey, this is real and I'm going to prove it if it's the last thing I do,
Right.
and with, in terms of, really like sort of owning it and coming out about it and standing up for it. It's a process that takes time.
Right.
It took me a long time to get to where I am now. When I first started out, there was, I had a few friends that I could trust who really knew me, and so it took me, time to really trust myself and step into my power. So I think that's a natural journey. And I think you can really judge where you're on that journey because if you're ready to step out and own it, that says I'm ready to trust myself. I'm in a
Right.
position where I've got there. If you're not quite ready, it's okay. You're still learning to trust yourself. It's all part of the process. And trusting ourselves is key and believing in ourselves, right? So it really does take time and practice and getting those validations. That's why I create all the exercises in the book. I teach this so people experience it personally. Don't take it from me. Go out and do this in your life. Feel this yourself, get these validations, these synchronicity, these undeniable experiences, and then you can't live any differently because you have to own it because you've experienced it and you know it for yourself.
Well, I think you bring up such a good point. That key of how this work really does support us in starting to trust ourselves, because outside of that trusting of ourselves is where we live kind of in this state of constant fear. And it can be
Yes.
very chaotic when you don't trust you. And so you're looking outside. And again, what we may see just on a physical level and the translation of that can be very scary. And so it's hugely empowering to start this work, even just for that, just to
Yeah.
So anyway, I have to
Oh,
ask you some
and
questions. Oh, go
well,
ahead.
real quick, and not to mention on top of that, you have the whole world telling you it doesn't exist.
Right.
Right? So you're fighting against the tide with this. So
Yeah.
just my advice is just hang in there. You'll just keep on fighting the good fight.
Yeah, and the development takes time. I'm glad you said that too, because I think that's important for people to know. It takes
Yep.
time. So in the book, you have these keys that really support us in unlocking the illumination code for ourselves and coming into relationship with this quantum intelligence. So key one is unlocking the gateway to our quantum dimension. So what is that? And
So
could you talk about how we are literally surrounded by data all the time?
yes, yes. So when we look at, intuition is a quantum phenomenon,
Mhm.
the key is simply the statement of a recognition that there's a part of you that knows everything. So really think about that, there's a part of your mind that knows everything that's happening everywhere in the world, everything that's happened, everything that will happen. In our, regular functioning mind, our brains are technically a reduction valve. We can only process so much information. So we call that our local information. That's our sort of local hard drive where we can
Mhm.
operate like on a daily basis and work with our local memory, recent memory, and, sort of project what's going to happen right in front of us. But our intuition goes beyond our thinking mind, goes beyond this reality in terms of this quantum field. It's able to access all of this information that's stored around us. So recognizing when that we start to trust the intuitive mind, which is different than the thinking mind. We don't have to process things. We don't have to work things out like we do figuring things out with our linear, logical, rational mind. Intuition just drops in. The computer download is such a great analogy, right? We couldn't even imagine this 100 years ago because we didn't understand networks and the internet and the computer storage and the cloud and everything, because it's a great metaphor for how intuition works, because all of that information is stored in the quantum field, which is sort of like the giant interpenetrating cloud hard drive of the universe that we have access to. We can dial in intentionally, put a little search in. I want to like connect. Is this the right path for me? You dial it in the little search engine of your intuition, and you can dial into the information around that can give you
Right.
feelings and thoughts and stuff that allow you to make decisions based on this bigger picture. So it's really an advanced way of thinking. It's a next level way of thinking.
Yeah. And I like that you're bringing this up too, because a lot of people associate psychic ability or intuitive ability just with reading other people or just prediction. And while you can access, all space, time, and dimension, one of the things I found fascinating and why I was curious and went down this rabbit hole was because I could access to learn more about what I was learning in the material realm. So, for example, I would go in and ask about Reiki. I wanted to know more about chakras. I wanted to understand our human functionality. So, it was never so much about my personal life or these types of things. It was like having access to the greatest professors of the
Yeah.
universe, So I hope people know too, it's not it's limitless, really, what you can learn and access and dial into. One of the things I wanted to ask you about this as well before we get deeper into the how, could you also talk a little bit about the ethics around this? Because there are some people that may be intuitive and they may just blurt things out and people are uncomfortable or didn't ask for that. How do you discern when to deliver information, to share information? What are your thoughts around that?
Such an important conversation, because the more that you go into this field, so to speak, the more you realize that there are a set of ethics. And in Intuition Lab, my school where I teach all of this, I have something called the prime directives,
Mm,
which are basically like just two really simple things to keep in mind when you're working with your intuition. And the first thing is guide, don't decide. We can't ever use our intuition to tell other people what to do. Like,
mhm.
people on this journey of self-discovery, and they have to do the work for themselves. We can use intuition to help other people, to guide them to make the right choice,
Right.
and to kind of steer them towards the path. But we can't take away their sovereignty and our power. And that's something that really got caught up, I think, with psychic readings. And when I was young, I used to go all the time. It was like, oh, tell me about this, what's going to happen with his boyfriend and should I do this? And so, I participate in that as a young person.
Yeah.
And it's not that it was, I mean, it worked. I actually, got really good information. I think, many psychics are very real, but when I started doing this work, when my first book, The Psychic Workshop, came out, I had a lot of radio shows asking me to come and do psychic readings. And I was doing these, and something about it just didn't feel right to me. And I realized it was because people were asking me to sort of take away that sovereignty that was creating their personal growth.
Right.
So that's why I ended up shifting gears and creating Intuition Lab to teach people to do it for themselves. I'm like,
Yes.
don't just come to me and take the easy way out, right? I want to teach you so you can do it and then you reap the benefits yourself, right? So I think it's important. That part of it is important. But to your other question, it's also important that we don't step on people's toes. Like, I have friends who are mediums who see people all the time, and yeah, you really have to use your judgment of when you're going to just say, hey, your grandma's here with me. Do you want to hear from her? And sometimes people love that, and some people really get freaked out. So that leads me to my second prime directive, which is always raise the vibe. So we never want to do anything or tell anybody anything that scares them or disempowers them, because intuition is all about empowerment. It wants you to rise into a higher vibration, to heal, to release any heavy energy, any unconsciousness that's holding you back from expanding with the universe into your highest potential and returning to the wholeness of being. Like, so
Yeah.
it's so amazing that to me that people are afraid of intuition, because you're really never safer than when you're living in harmony with your true intuition. It has your back. It is the one thing that will never let you down when you're really aligned with it. So making that commitment when you work with it, to, if there's ever anything you have to say to someone that isn't what they want to hear, right? So because
Yeah.
sometimes your intuition, you're with a friend and you're like, this guy's a loser, like, no, but you can't say my intuition says break up with him, right? Like, that's not good. But you can use your intuition to communicate things that could help her or him to see these things, right?
Right.
Like, ask questions, make suggestions, kind of gently use your intuition to communicate things in a helpful, empowering way to let them make those choices to free themselves and rise higher.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Thank you for sharing that. And, another thing, it's funny, I was not expecting to ask you all these other questions,
I
but I'm
love it.
like,
I love it.
okay.
Yeah.
So another thing that is commonly questioned within the realm of intuition, a lot of people think there's an idea of what that looks like, right? So I'm only psychic if
Mm.
I can see spirits in the room, or I'm only psychic if I can tell you what's happening next week. Can you talk a little bit about the different ways that we are able to perceive? And from your experience in this work and with teaching people, do you notice that some people just have more of a natural inclination towards certain types of translation or interaction?
Absolutely. And that's literally what I wrote. My last book, Radical Intuition, is 100% based on that. So I would recommend checking that out. Now, so that was my question as well, because one of the things, I wrestled with that for a while, because there was, certain things that I couldn't do that other people would do. And I would be
Right.
like, oh, is there some, I'm not as good as them because I can't do this, and then when I started teaching, I started noticing all my students coming in. Some people were really great at this thing, and other people were great at this thing. And then I realized, well, wait a second. We all sort of have our own unique intuitive language,
Right.
and everybody's a little bit different. And so, what I actually took me a long time to write this book, through a lot of research in my classes and courses with people, is it really boils down to there's four main types of intuition, and that we have these pathways. Some people use some pathways more than other. The pathways are simple: body, mind, heart, and spirit. That's right. We get intuitive impressions. Some people feel things in their body. They get gut feelings. They'll have actual physical sensations. You might even hear sounds, right? Or have visions.
Yeah.
All of these things, our body sensors can communicate our intuition through us in so many ways, right? So you have that category of people, even mediums, people see ghosts, things like that, in that physical intuition of the body category. Then we have another category, the intuition of the mind. This is where you have knowings and inner guidance, and you have this like senses, you just know things and you don't know why. People who are natural, like coaches, guides, teachers, gurus, able to really bring through that inner wisdom. aspect
Mhm.
of intuition. And then we have the third pathways through the heart, through the emotions, right? And that's when you have those like those callings. You feel like, I don't know why, I just have this feeling I need to go out into the world and do this thing that I have this gift for, or passion or leadership or new ideas and creativity and visionary people, right? So this whole sort of this emotive, change oriented, transformational type of intuition that comes in to move the world forward, which is
Yeah.
really beautiful and exciting. And then finally, this intuition of the spirit, which is that sort of that beautiful divine connection that we all have when we feel the oneness, we feel the transcendence of this reality and all the amazing experiences that can come with that. So if you look through that lens of those four sort of pathways, you can boil every sort of experience you can think of down into one of those pathways. So I have a great little quiz. It's actually free on my website if you want to take it, anybody who's listening too. It's called your intuition affinity quiz. And you'll take a little quiz and then you can figure out which pathways you're using the most.
Yeah.
And then you rely on those a little bit more. Pay attention if your body's starting to talk to you, if you're high in the physical. And you can work on the other pathways to develop them all. Because ideally, we can use them all. And the more open all four are, the more information we're going to end up getting.
I have to say this just for everyone listening as well. Like, I'm not just asking Kim these random questions. Part of this is because really your book is so informative. So I just want people to know a lot of what you're sharing. You provide exercises, you provide journal prompts. There's even downloads from the website that correspond with the book. So a lot of this information and the how to is in there. And I promise I'm going to ask her some of that. We only have a little time, so I want to ask her all the things I know people
Yeah.
question in this realm. So you just mentioned something that also I think is so important for people to understand is a big part of it is paying attention to you, like really noticing how you sense and perceive, and then, go on and translate whatever that is, but that noticing for yourself because
Mm-hmm.
it may look very different again than someone else. So I remember I really struggled in one of my first intuition classes because they were very rigid about this is the way that you have to connect and this is the way you have to read. And it was like a one formula thing. But there was
Mm-hmm.
something in me that was so resistant to it.
Mm-hmm.
And fortunately, I trusted how I was being guided. And then that, it worked out. So
Mm-hmm.
I always thought, like, wow, why don't people get more information like what you're sharing? That you really do have to pay attention to you in the
Absolutely.
using of all of these tools. So one of the things I have to ask you about this because um, sometimes when people ask me like, well, what is it like for you? So I'm curious what it's like for you too, Kim.
Mm-hmm.
And the best way I can describe it for my own experience, it almost feels like telepathy. Like it
Mm-hmm.
feels like some kind of communication that's not, I'm not hearing something. I'm not necessarily seeing, but
Mm-hmm.
there's this weird, it seems almost like telepathic in some way. So I want to ask you about your experience of receptivity, but also could you share a little bit about guides and other energies that may be working with us?
Absolutely. And I think what you're saying is very common. I kind of, to me, I kind of look at that as I call it the knowing feeling. When you sort of know something and feel something at the
Yeah,
same time, and it can be just a simple example of like, oh, you're going to buy a new car. And I don't know why, but that car is the one for me. There's two cars. It's not a pros and cons list, but you just have a knowing, but it's
right.
kind of also a feeling, right? And it feels a little like telepathy, I think, when it's one of those things where you tap into the field and there's a part of you that knows that that's a good car, it's not going to break down. And maybe the other part of you knows that that one was in a wreck and might not last so long. You might not know this, but you're getting all this quantum information that's feeding your mind. Which is why we're actually proven to make decisions more often based on feelings than our pros and cons list, because there is a part of us that knows that these feelings are actually real and they're
Right.
giving us quality information. So yeah, so it's really important to sort of to tap into to that sort of sense of knowingness and trust it and honor it. And was there a second part to your question? I
Yeah.
think
So
I felt
if
like I
you
was
could,
going somewhere there.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And then like not just that we're surrounded literally
Oh, the
by
guides. Yeah.
information, but yeah, also the idea of working with guides. And a lot of people are curious about, do you have to call on them or are they there anyway? Those types of things.
Yeah, and I think that again, I think that quantum physics is offering some really interesting explanations for our experience with our loved ones and teachers that are not living in this physical reality. So, and I talk in the book about the different levels of reality, and this world that we live in is just, I call it the mind matrix because it really is sort of like a simulation. It's a projection of stuff that seems like matter, but it's not really matter. And it's really the theater that we live in this physical reality, but it's not reality, right? The real reality is invisible. It's interpenetrated with us and it exists on a different vibration and frequency, which is why we don't perceive it, right? Just remember, we are like robots. We have basic sensors, just like a robot's built with different sensors. Ours are just our five senses. So there's so much information and things happening around us that our five senses just don't perceive.
Right.
So a part of that, though, are the people, the loved ones that are guiding forces, are people that are looking out for us, working behind the scenes in our life because they are entangled with us, because they have coherent feelings of love for us, or whatever reason. So realizing that, first of all, they don't live in like some cloud up in the sky, right? They live interpenetrated with us on the same plane with us, just in a different vibrational frequency. So I'm not going to pretend to know all the dynamics of spiritual life and what a day looks like or what a year looks like in the spiritual world, but I can tell you from my own personal experiences that um, there is crossover. It's much easier for them to consciously connect with us than it is for us to consciously connect with them. I think part of the reason is just, we have these limited brains that are sort of, stuck here, and there are these points of consciousness. So when you start to work with your intuition and you go deeper, if you have an awakening, you start to have experiences like out of body experiences, or some people have even had near death experiences that have showed them that one thing that we know is that our consciousness is not located in our brain. It's one of those things that it feels like it is because, this is how this whole being that we are operates. But if you've ever had a out of body experience, you've realized that your mind and awareness is in some completely different place other than your physical body. So looking at our, guiding forces and guides and teachers and family members that are here, it's no different in that sense that they can travel by thought. They can be there in an instant. They're entangled with you. So when you think about them, you attract them. So that's why, calling on them, thinking about them, it's not that they're just sitting around waiting for you to call on them or anything. It's just that that's a magnetic attraction.
Yeah.
So it gets really interesting when you start to really dive into that. But we do have an invisible group of friends that are with us, supporting us as we journey through this life.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting when you think of it in the way too of how we also do that with each other. I mean, how
Mm.
we're alive in body, but we're still able to communicate with each other in a non-physical way. And
Yes,
we do it all the time. And we could go down a rabbit hole around that, right? Um,
absolutely.
yeah. But I also wanted to ask you about this because this is another thing, like we don't want to go too far off the deep end, right? So where do you find that sweet spot between recognizing I'm here, I'm present, I'm in the material realm, and simultaneously accessing that ability to perceive what is in the non-physical?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So important. And I think that in itself, it really hits the nail on the head is we have to embody our true nature of what we are living in the present moment. And that's the real secret to enlightenment is it's in the present moment. And right now in this present moment, we are beings that are at once grounded in this physical world and also part of a transcendent world of energy. So we don't want to deny either. Going off the deep end, and I hear you. I'm 100% grounded in needing validations, integrating this with my regular life. I
Yeah.
think it's so important to recognize that because we've all known people who've just had the head too much in the clouds, living another place, and that's just not where we are in this physical world. It's not reality. There is a place for reality, a beautiful place. We live in a world of magic and wonder. Let's not shut that down and call it something negative or
Right.
useless. It's something that's beautiful, and we're meant to be here and learn from that and participate in this earthly experience and use our intuition to like enliven that experience and deepen that that experience. So we don't want to push anything out. We don't want to say one thing's bad and another thing's good. That's how we got in this position to begin with. Everybody's, oh, I'm stuck in the material world and that other world doesn't exist. Well, we don't want to be the other way either, right? We can't like push the body down. Oh, the body's this negative thing. No, it's a beautiful union, and we have to love and respect both aspects of our humanity. I mean, that's what real life and wholeness is, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And, now with all that you share, I know people are probably like, ooh, how do I do this? Right.
Yes.
So I just wanted to ask you a little bit about that. Like, I think you've shared that we're surrounded by information and we all have the ability to perceive it, to access it. And we didn't talk too much about this, but if you could talk a little bit about um, maybe like the different realms, the dimensions, the different frequencies that are accessible to us because we can, you know,
Yes.
go into like higher realms or different planes of information. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so the big barrier to intuition, the greatest barrier to intuition is our overthinking mind,
Mm,
right? So whatever we do, we have to think about quieting that mind, calming it down, relaxing it, because as long as we're running around like maniacs, scrolling on our phones, always worrying, being in a state of fear and stress, thinking. Power of Now is a great book to do that. I think that book is a really great primer for anyone who wants to work with their intuition by Eckhart Tolle.
mhm,
So it teaches you to get into the stillness, in this presence, in the quiet of this moment, because this moment is where the magic is. So really knowing that with the goal in mind of getting that overthinking mind out of the way, there's really two primary ways that we get intuitive impressions. So the first thing is to raise our vibration, and this is what we do when I work with someone. We do intuition work. We always do a little meditation first. We smile, we lift ourselves up, because I realized early on, it took me a little while, but pretty soon I realized that I had my most powerful spiritual experiences, my best intuitive information when I was feeling good. And when I
mm,
was younger, I didn't put the connection together. I was like, why does this always happen? I'd have an out of body experience when I was like happy. I'd go to bed, and I had a great day, and this would happen. I was like, why is this happening when I'm happy all the time? And I noticed there was a theme, right? So put that down into my this collection data, right? So as time moved on, we started studying brain waves, and we understand that there's different levels of brain waves. So when you're in your thinking mind, you're in this sort of beta brain, this monkey mind that's like always going a mile a minute, that blocks out your intuitive signals. So when you raise your vibration, you get into a happier place, a calmer, quieter place. This is where actual intuitive energy is stored. It's stored in this sort of alpha place, this high vibration place that is above the conscious mind and all of its sort of toxic thinking rituals. So getting into that high vibration allows you to tap into all of that information consciously, intentionally, and from the clearest place of full awakened clarity. Now, the other way, we also often get information, and some people get more information like this, is through the unconscious, through that sort of hypnagogic state when we're like in the theta or delta brain waves. Like Edgar Casey's a
Edgar
great
Casey.
example.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Great example of that. Sleeping Prophet. He would go into hypnosis, and he could access the quantum field like nobody's business. And that's one of the reasons I love working with the Casey Institute, because he was one of the first people out there. He's showing us what we're capable of,
Right.
letting our minds flow and wander through this quantum field. And I think he'd be really on board with all of this stuff that's happening now with physics. And it really explained what he was doing. He didn't know what he was doing. He
Yeah.
just knew that he could do it, right? Um, so look, paying attention to things that drop into your mind when you fall asleep, ideas that come to your head when you wake up in the middle of the night. Einstein talked about that a lot too. Just revelations. Oh, solved a problem in the middle of the night when he woke up, right? Because your mind is shut off. That sort of ego mind. Our ego mind wants to control things. It wants to keep us in this reality and shut us off from all of that sort of magic that's outside of it. So, getting more into those sort of, I call them no mind zones, where you are in a place of peace and comfort and relaxation, where those intuitive ideas and revelations can just drop in.
Oh, 100%. This is why I really think that, because now hindsight, I'm like, oh, okay, this is how I perceived non-physical when I was younger, right? And then, of course, the fear that developed around that. But then also I realized Reiki in a lot of ways to me is kind of like a gateway to
Mm.
this awareness. And I think is so invaluable for people to seek out ways to develop it, to understand it. It
Mm-hmm.
really, because with everything that you're saying too, I don't think you can really separate energy work from access to the intuitive mind and how we perceive. But another
Mm-hmm.
thing too, with what you're saying, it reminds me of, I think a lot of times we don't realize when we're accessing our intuitive minds, or we have other labels for things, so we may not put it in that category. So
Mm-hmm.
to your point, like if we have these downloads, this like instant like inspiration or insights or aha moments, and that could be a very intuitive stream of consciousness, or we get into a certain flow that's very clean and clear outside of that busy mind, like you say. So
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to point that out again so people can recognize how this could be important to our everyday life. So
Mm-hmm.
could you just talk a little bit about that before you have to leave us, like how this really can support everyday life? It's not just about sitting and doing readings necessarily.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I always say, whatever you do in life, you're going to do it better with your intuition.
Yeah.
Whether you're a parent, whether you're a teacher, whether you're an artist, whether you're a scientist, whether you give psychic readings or you want to integrate intuition into your holistic practice, whatever it is, when you do it in tandem, trusting your intuition, it's going to be next level
Yeah.
because you have a bonus. You have the addition of all of this other information and this sort of deeper dimension to the work that you're doing in life. So that's one of the things I think it's really important to recognize is that I use my intuition. It's always on. It's never, I don't have to sit down and pull tarot cards to do it. That's fun. I love doing that,
Yeah.
but I don't have to, right? Because I've learned to listen to my intuition. And in the book, I give a lot of ways to sort of recognize your intuition versus the other thoughts in your head, right? So the part of that is determining, oh, yeah, this is my intuition. I'm going to trust it. I'm going to use my intuition to buy this car. I'm going to use my intuition to decide which way I'm going to drive to work today that doesn't have traffic, right? I'm going to use my intuition to relate to my kids and really understand what they're going through or see, if someone needs help with something or with my partner, right? There's so many different ways that this applies to life. But ultimately, at the end, it really comes down to really this really sacred, beautiful experience of divine connection with all things. But we meet it at the rubber meets the road at where we live our daily life and how we choose to follow it in every little bit throughout each day.
Yes, yes. And I'm glad you bring up tarot, because you do talk about in the book intuition activation tools, such as
Mm-hmm.
cards. And you even have on your site where people can download cards. So could you talk a little bit about these tools that we do have access to that help us to be in communication with or translate intuitively, and the power of symbolism, why
Mm.
imagery can be so powerful in that intuitive translation?
Yeah, I was really called to create this card deck many years ago, and it took me a while to actually build it. And it really, I think, is the best tool, my insight card deck for developing intuition. And it's a little different than tarot and oracle cards in that it's just a creation of images, basically, that are designed to evoke an intuitive response. So if you're looking for guidance, you look at the card and let the card speak to you. And there's, a little system that we use when we look at the card to evoke that image. And it's based on an ancient tradition of sacred seeing. It's called Visio Divina, the idea that the sacred reveals itself through images. And this is so beautiful to me because the intuitive side of your brain is very often metaphorical. It's that side of the brain that's not linear. It doesn't always communicate in clear sentences, right? It shows you metaphor. It's that beautiful creative side of your brain that a picture is worth 1,000 words, right? So think about it from the terms of the field. They can just drop a symbolism in a little symbol or something symbolic into your mind, and it can unleash so many different things in one little picture than if you say all these words. So I think it's a lot easier to download images like that for your intuition. So that's one of the reasons why it works that way. But the cards, and I have a free online deck. You guys can play with it and use it 24/7. It's always up there for you. Um, it's really designed to help you learn your intuitive language as you start to work with these. See how your intuition speaks to you. See what comes up, and are you hearing things, feeling things? How is your intuition move through them? So I really recommend starting a practice to work with your intuition. Like I said, if you want to use it 24/7, you have to get in the habit of relying on it and cultivating it. So make it part of your daily ritual, your meditation practice, pull a card, just keep that intuition muscle flexed and moving. And you'll find out the more you focus on your intuition, the more intuitive experience comes to you. It's magnetic. You'll start seeing more signs and synchronicity, looking at the clock at 1:11, because intuition, it draws your attention. It's all about that stuff. And you'll recognize you're living more in that intuitive zone when you feed it every day.
Yeah, and I do want to say again, you do put a lot of different exercises and help to clarify for us the different ways that the universe is speaking to us all the time and how to really hone in onto these moments of intuitive recognition so we can kind of strengthen that muscle. So I do want to ask you before you go, what is it that you do hope people get from this book? I mean, it's a really good book.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And, you know, people ask me that question. And I think at the end of the day, obviously, first of all, I want people to understand that their intuition is real and learn to know and trust it. But ultimately, where that path leads is this rediscovery of the magic and wonder of the universe. And for me, that's the end goal, is realizing that we live in a beautiful world where we have so much to discover. We are on the beginning of this inner frontier, and I would love for people to recognize that their intuition is their deepest guide on this life journey and opens up a whole new world to experience, and that world will lead them back to their own self and their whole being. And that's really the destination that we're all going for.
Yeah, 100%. I can't thank you enough for this conversation, but I want everyone to know too, if they go to your website, Kim Chestney, and of course it's down in the show description, but kimchestney.com, there on your site, you will see the classes that you offer. I want to ask you about the Intuition Lab, but you also have right there on the home screen, you can see where you can choose a card and work with the deck and everything that you just shared. But you do have the Intuition Lab. So could you tell us a little bit about that, as well as a class that will start tomorrow?
Yes, very
Inner
exciting.
Magic. Yes.
Yes, Inner Magic. So this is the first course I'm doing based on the Illumination Code books. So at Intuition Lab, I started in 2017, basically to open up space for inner explorers, people who love their intuition, to come out and play and experience this magic for themselves. So we work in groups, we have work with partners. You get a real chance to get validations for your intuition and get personal, like, validating experience that helps you to know and trust your intuition in everything you do. So we're launching our next 4 weeks class tomorrow, which is based on all the fun stuff in the book. So you can come out and play with us. And I mean, you can also watch remotely. You don't have to do it live. Some people are a little shy, but
Yeah.
if you want to get out there and get some validations for your intuition, you can practice live with me.
Perfect. So that's what I wanted to know, especially because people are in all different time zones. If
Yep.
they sign up for the class, they still have access to the
Yep.
recordings. Okay.
Yep.
And
Absolutely. You can do it both ways.
perfect. And then the Intuition Lab is ongoing, or it's always different classes that are coming up outside of that.
Yeah. Yeah. So I do offer quarterly classes, quarterly workshop series, and I also have a 1 year program, which is my favorite program. It's the Sacred Guide, and it's really a 1 year journey into your intuition, starting out with an intuition attunement, and then moving out through the year, ending with things like remote viewing, past life discovery, all of this juicy sort of deep Akashic record reading that you get to once you've fully embraced your intuition and are ready to dive into it.
Beautiful. So all of the information, including the link to the book, The Illumination Code, 7 Keys to Unlock Your Quantum Intelligence. I mean, I loved it so much because you do blend in the scientific aspect and make this more not just relatable, I think ingestible and acceptable to some people who are sometimes afraid of seeming too woo woo or whatever fears we may have. I think your book, in a lot of ways, will help to dissipate some of the fears and a lot of the questions that we have around intuition. One last thing before you go, I just really quickly, because you mentioned it, the past lives.
Mhm.
Is that something that you think supports us in life today? Is that something that you think is valuable for people to be able to access?
Yeah, I mean, we carry our past life, or we really should call it other life, since there's really time is a subjective experience.
Mhm.
We carry those impressions with us, and it can be really important to understand our past lives, to really understand ourselves, understand why we have natural tendencies, natural talents, natural aversions. It can help us to release sort of unconscious pain, unconscious trauma, bringing stuff like that into the light. And I think our purpose in this life is often sort of balancing out or healing things from, previous realities and things that we've done. So, I mean, there's a reason why we don't remember them, because, our brain is a reduction valve and we want a fresh start and we want to have a clean slate to work with. But really intuitively connecting with them on a healthy level is a huge opportunity, I think, for healing and also for really getting really cool validations of the continuous nature of life.
Yeah, that's beautifully said. Well, I have to thank you so much again for coming to have this conversation, Kim. I think you gave us a lot of good information. Everyone, the link to Kim's work is down in the show description, kimchestney.com. We will see you all very soon. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. Bye for now. Okay, beautiful alchemist. Of course, I want to first say thank you again to Kim for coming and sharing all of this wonderful insight and wisdom about intuition, intuitive connection with us. Sorry. And her book again is called The Illumination Code, 7 Keys to Unlock Your Quantum Intelligence. Again, she has authored other books. One is called Radical Intuition, and the other is called The Psychic Workshop. And she is very dedicated, as you can see, about making sure that people know how to come into relationship with this aspect of their being and their design. So kimchestney.com, link is down in the show description. Don't forget, she has a class starting tomorrow called Inner Magic. It starts May 7th. And if you want to go but can't attend live, either way, you can access the recordings. The other thing I want to let you all know, of course, is that the Reiki retreat will be coming up in September. And I am so excited. The class is almost full. There are only 3 spots left as of the day that I'm recording this. So if you are interested in joining me in September in San Diego for 5 days Shoden Okiden class, be sure to reach out to me. I can get the information over to you, or you can learn more through my website at theenergeticalchemist.com. I am so thankful for this time and this space that we have together to share, to learn, to exchange, and grow together. Thank you again to Kim. I hope you all are having a gorgeous day, and remember to always journey in love.